Hi everybody, Dr. Smock here again. In the last video, we brought a PSD file into After Effects. We preserved all those layers and then animated each of them. We ended up with this nice little simple lower third. In this video, we're going to build a similar looking lower third, but we're going to build it completely in After Effects. We're going to use a few different animation techniques on it. And just so you know, these are techniques you could also use with a lower third that you designed in Photoshop and then brought into After Effects. To get started, I'm going to make a new composition. I'm going to stay inside of the same project folder. I'm just going to go with the 1080 2997 settings here. I'm going to change the comp name to native lower third -1. Native meaning we're just building it in the same application where we're going to be animating it, so it's native to After Effects. I'm going to change my duration here to 30, just so I have some room to work with if I need it, and click OK. All right, so now that we have our composition created, the first thing we need to do is get some text on screen. So this will end up being the text that's on our lower third. We're just going to draw it out here on its own first. We'll stick with Jeff Lebowski as our subject for this one too. Just drag that text box out a little so we can see it all. I just have my text set to 90. I have a white color on. That'll work for our purposes for the moment. I'm just going to tighten that text box up a little bit there. And that looks pretty good. As I typed it, it was automatically centered inside the text box. That's just because the last thing I typed in here I must have also centered, and so that center text property was already set. If you're following along and yours is left aligning or right aligning, make sure you click on center. So yours looks like what you see on the screen here. After our text is set, which it is for the moment, we're going to create another layer. Go to Layer, New, Layer, New, Shape Layer. I'm going to click and drag that layer underneath the text layer. So as I draw the shape that's going to be the background behind this initially, it'll actually show up behind it. I just have my fill set to red. I'm going to click my rectangle tool and click and drag out a background for the lower third. You can choose any color for that shape you want. I just have red selected so it'll be very bright and easy for us to see for the moment. We'll be making some changes to this as we go along though. Next thing I'm going to do, get my selection tool out, I'm going to align these two objects with each other. So we have our shape layer and our Jeff Lebowski layer. If I come down to the corner here, I have an align panel. If you don't see this in After Effects right now, wherever you are, go up to Window, select Align, and that will bring it up. By default, since I just have one layer selected or one object selected, if I try to align this, it's going to align it to the composition. If I come over to my layers and select both of those, just click on one, hold Shift, click the other, you'll see that Align Layers to changes to selection, so everything that's selected. What I want to do is align these to their center points. So I'm first going to click on the vertical alignment option here, and we can see that's taken effect simply by looking at where those two handles are in relation to each other. They're vertically centered to each other. Then I can do the same with the horizontal center option. And again, we can double check that looking at those anchor points and see that we're all set. I'm going to click off there for a moment. And yeah, that looks okay. Looks like we're in good shape for our next step, which is adding a mask to this. However, before I do that, I'm just going to rename my shape layer. I'm just going to call it red rec for red rectangle so I can keep track of it as we're working. And what we want to do with this is we want to have the background just kind of appear out of nothingness. But I'm only going to have this first half of it appear from the left. I'm going to have the right side appear from over on the right. I'm going to do that with a mask. So with my layer selected, I'm going to come up to the rectangle tool. Then I'm going to scroll over here a little bit to this option with this tool where we can use it to create a mask. So if you mouse over this icon next to the star, it'll say Tool Creates Mask, meaning that when we draw with this rectangle tool now, we're actually going to be creating a mask. It's being directly applied to that red rectangle shape layer because that's the layer we had selected when we chose to do this. I'm just going to make it so the mask is not revealing anything, but it's pretty close to that edge. I want to have another copy of this mask over on the right. So what I'm going to do is select it down in the layer and do on the keyboard a Command D. That just duplicates it. I'm going to get my selection tool out, and then I'm just going to drag that over. I want to have it lined up with this one, right? And so I could use the Align tool, I guess, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to hold Shift down, and that's going to keep it aligned nicely for us. And we'll position it similarly so that it's not revealing any of that background yet. We're in our first frame here, and I'm going to select both of these masks in the layers, and then type the M key. That's going to bring up the mask path option. I'm going to go ahead and click the stopwatch in this first mask. And what you'll see is that for both masks, because I had both selected, I get a keyframe in that first position. And that's exactly what I want. I want both to be positioned where they are in this keyframe. As we go over time, though, we want those masks to be expanding and revealing that background color. I'm just going to change my zoom a little bit here. And just for the sake of keeping things simple, I'm going to go in half-second increments in this lower third like I did in our previous video too. So I just drag my playhead out about half a second. I'll select that mask. I don't want the whole thing, so we'll double click, try that again. There we are. So now I can just expand this, and I'm going to bring it over about halfway into the name, which I believe is probably right about there. If I wanted to be precise, I could go up to Window and get out my, View, and get out my rulers, show rulers. And I could, drag a guide over into the center. But I'm not going to worry that much about how precise I'm being with this for the example here. We can see that it automatically dropped a keyframe in where we need one, so that looks good there. So I'm going to click on Mask 2, double click, and click and drag that over. And I'm going to have it just overlap a little bit there. Again, kind of coming to the center. Well, let's hit play and see how we did. All right, that looks decent. The only thing that's a little bit strange is that text is always on the screen. So let's take care of that. I'm going to twirl that layer closed so we don't see everything inside of Red Rec. And I'm going to expand my panel down here so I can have access to the track matte options. In my Red Rec layer, I'm going to click the pull down and track matte and change it to alpha matte. Essentially what that does is it looks at that top layer, the layer right above our Red Rec, and it uses that as a matte, kind of like a matte in a photo frame, right? If you want the photo to show so people can see it, you put it where the hole is, inside that matte. That's essentially what we're doing here. We're using that Jeff Lebowski layer as a matte, and we're having what's in the Red Rec layer show through it. Now, when we rewind and hit play, it animates the text onto the screen using that mask we created. I'm going to select Red Rec, and then I'm going to do a Command D to duplicate it. I'm going to drag it down so it's on the bottom here. And I'm going to twirl that open. Contents, the rectangle, make sure that's selected. I'm going to move forward a little bit my playhead so I can see. There we have it. There's our red rectangle coming in. We can't see any of our text because our text is also red, right? So it's just covering it up. But with that new layer selected, if I come up to fill and I change that, say we go to a gray, hit OK, now we can see our red text behind. If we're sticking to the same basic colors that we were using for our first lower third from our other video, you just come forward here so everything's on screen, I would need to change this to white, and I would control that with the red rectangle layer that we initially made. So I have that selected, I come up to fill, and I set it to white. There we go. There's one more change I want to make, and that is to the gray rec layer. I want to turn off that alpha matte. We don't need it on that layer. So there we are. We're all set. We are ready to do the area for the subtitle. That's going to be our yellow rectangle that will be placed underneath our gray rectangle here. I could draw a new rectangle if I wanted to, but why bother? I have a perfectly good rectangle that's already the right width right here. I'm just going to select it in the layers and do Command D to duplicate it. I'm going to rename it Yellow Rec. And while it's selected, I'm going to come up to the fill, get into a decent range here. Oh, that's very bright. Let's not do that. A little darker. Somewhere in there is fine. Okay, so obviously that's not in the right position. It's not the right shape, but that's okay. We can deal with that. With that layer selected, I can just click and drag down. If I hold Shift, I'll keep this lined up nicely. And I can bring it down put it right about there. So right now, the matte that is applied to this new yellow layer is the same matte that we have on our other existing layers, right? Because it's just a copy. I don't really want those mattes applied. And you might be thinking, oh, that looks about like the right height. Well, that just happens to be coincidence. I wasn't setting those mattes so that we could use them here. In fact, I want to use a different, I'm sorry, not matte, mask. I want to use a different mask for that yellow rectangle. So I'm just going to twirl that open, and I'm going to select those masks and delete them. And from here, I'll just double click on that handle. And I'm going to resize it. That's about the size I want. I'll just drag it up into position, holding Shift again to constrain those proportions. It's a little higher. There we go. Now I just need some text to put on it. I'm going to grab my text tool and just drag out a text box. I'll position it in a moment. I'm going to change my font size to 40. Let's start there and see how it looks. Use that same Adobe Clean font. I like how that looks. And the dude, I'm going to have this left align. Grab my selection tool and slide it up. Maybe a little big. The text tool back out. I'll drag that down. Let's go for 32. I'm going to change that color to black. Okay, so I have the yellow rectangle created. I have the dude text created. I'm going to move a couple things around real quick here in my layers. Mainly, I'm going to grab the yellow rec layer and I'm going to move it up so it's right underneath the dude. I'm happy with the look, but I'm going to need to take the same actions here that I did before. That means that I'm going to need to eventually turn this alpha matte on for the dude. We're not quite there yet. First, I need to make a new mask. So with yellow rec selected, I'm going to go to the rectangle tool. I'm going to click the tool creates mask option. And I'm going to move, let's see, I'm already at the half-second mark. That's where I want to be. So I'm going to drag out a long, skinny mask here. Just let go. I'm going to tap M to get the mask path options. Click the stopwatch to drop a keyframe. Go forward half a second. I'm going to get my selection tool. Double click on that mask and expand it so it's revealing that yellow triangle. Let's play it back, see how it turned out. Not too bad. Now let's do the same thing we did to our first rectangle. Let's set the alpha for the yellow rec to the dude layer. That turns our text yellow. Let's duplicate that yellow rec. I'm going to drag it down underneath here. And then I'm going to take the yellow rec layer and I'm going to make it black. It gives us black text again. And now we'll have both of those animate using that mask just like we had it animate for the first part of the lower third. From here, the only thing left to do would be to go through and set keyframes to animate it out. And I'll leave that to you. You can copy and paste these back in the version you're working on and see if you can get it to animate out as smoothly as we have it animating in. You might even think about adding some easy ease in a few places to the keyframes just to make that animation a little bit smoother. I hope this has been helpful, and if you have any questions, make sure to let me know.